Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cultured Pull List. This week, we are going to be talking about the newly wrapped up miniseries from Marvel, Avengers Twilight. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Hello, everyone. I'm your usual host, Mike, and once again, I am joined by my friend Jerry from ComicsCuts. How are you doing tonight, Jerry?
Fantastic. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Pretty excited to talk about this series. I don't know. For some reason, it feels like it came out a while ago, but it's only been like 6 months since it started. But yeah, it just wrapped up like last week. I think was issue
Yeah,
six came
last
out.
week
Yeah, yeah.
was the finale.
Yeah, so for those of you who are not aware, Avengers Twilight's basically, I mean, it's kind of Marvel's answer to like the Dark Knight Rises with a little bit of Kingdom Come in there, but it's definitely its own thing as well. But it is definitely reminiscent of that because it takes place in kind of like a bleak future, and superheroes are retired, all that stuff. Before we get too deep into this, I did just want to talk about the Alex Ross covers for this series because I'm pretty sure these were like considered the A covers, but they're just all so freaking good. He didn't do the art on the inside. Daniel Acuna did that, which I want to talk about later. But yeah, just all of these covers are so cool. I really like the design of the suits, which I think was probably more Daniel Acuna. I'm not sure, but yeah, just they're all super cool. I especially like the Captain America, Iron Man, and Hulk ones. Well, honestly, the Thor one's really cool too. They're all really good, honestly. Like, yeah, they're all pretty sick, really cool covers, and they're actually kind of hard for me to find. I was able to get the cover, the Alex Ross cover for the first issue and the last issue, and I got a second printing of the second issue, the Iron Man one, but all the other ones, it was kind of hard for me to get my hands on the Alex Ross one. I don't know if like they were just selling really quick or like my local shops weren't like ordering enough of them or what, but
Yeah, I love the covers, and it was cool how when they were coming out, like, I you knew sometimes if you saw the cover before the book was coming,
mm,
which heroes were going to come back,
yeah,
which I get they have to do that to sell the book, and
yeah, yeah.
they want to you know show off the new Alex Ross covers,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I kind of wish it was like you know no art on the cover and like at least maybe
Yeah,
a second print, but that's just not the way the business works. And
yeah,
movies have the same thing with
yeah, yeah,
trailers, and
yeah, for
but
sure.
the covers were sick, and
Yeah.
the art inside, everything was
Hmm.
just incredible.
Yeah, they did kind of spoil Iron Man and Ms. Marvel's returns a little bit. Like I think like before, like with Thor and Hulk, they teased them in the issue prior before
Uh-huh.
you really got to see the cover, but the next issue's cover. But with Iron Man and Kamala, they kind of like showed that before, and you're like, oh, okay, well they're coming back. Especially Kamala was, Ms. Marvel was an obvious like, oh well, I mean the next issue has her on the front, so it's got to be that she comes back. So, yeah.
Yeah. And listen, Kamala was actually great. Like,
Hmm.
fan of Kamala. I feel like I'm, one of the few people who like actually likes her as a character.
She
Uh,
really grew on me. Like when she was first introduced, I'm like, why is she Ms. Marvel if she has like Mr. Fantastic's powers and like is an Inhuman and has nothing to do with it? But then like I think playing the Avengers game was actually like the first like my first introduction when I was like, oh, she's not half bad. And then like reading some of the comics and like her series and everything, I'm like, she's actually a pretty cool character. Not gonna lie.
yeah, it's funny you say it because for me it was the Avengers game, and
Yeah.
then the series
Hmm.
really, won her over for me because
Yeah.
I loved that show and I was
Yeah.
expecting to hate it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, but it was actually a pretty good show. I feel like it doesn't get enough credit for what it is. It's actually pretty damn good.
Stevie and I talk about that like all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you
Is
know,
is 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 he one of the haters of that show?
no, no,
Okay.
he loves it too.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice, nice.
he's a fan. I don't know if he's a fan of her from anything else,
Sure,
but
sure.
at least for the show. And I know we both feel that they really messed up with the Marvels
Yeah.
because, you know, listen, they did such a good job with the Disney Plus show, and then the
Hmm.
Marvels comes out,
Yeah,
and
that was unfortunate.
fans it's not a lot of people watch the show, so like that was
Yeah.
their
Right.
introduction, and you
Exactly.
have this great character, this phenomenal actress,
Yeah.
and I think that that was a misstep on their part.
Yeah,
um
for sure.
yeah, but in terms of Avengers Twilight, I
Hmm.
like her in there. I gotta say, there's one character I think that they should have put in there that they didn't, and they could have done Peter, they could have done Miles, but I think that Spider-Man should have been represented in the story. He's like
Yeah.
their most popular character,
Hmm.
and I think I don't know. I would have loved to have seen him in this story and like what happens to Peter Parker
Yeah,
in
for sure.
utopian future.
Yeah, like they did come out with Spider-Man Reign, I think, and they're doing a
Oh,
sequel to that, which is like a dystopian version of Spider-Man. But I do agree with this. This story could have benefited from Spider-Man. Also, it seems like every time they have a dystopian like future in Marvel, they're like, let's kill Spider-Man. It's like
yeah.
almost every single time it's like Spider-Man dies. I don't know
Yeah,
why. I don't know why, because
right.
like you said, he's one of Marvel's biggest characters and most beloved characters. I don't know why they do that.
Yeah. I do think it was fitting for Captain America to be like the star of the show.
Yeah.
Captain America is just like, uh, and I know that it's like tough to say this. It's not tough for me to say it, but I
Yeah.
don't know that everyone feels the way that I do on this,
Hmm.
just because we live in such a polarized country right now.
Yeah.
But like Captain America is like, for me, that character that pretty much everything he does, like I think he's right about absolutely everything. Like from a
Yeah.
moral and
Right.
diplomatic standpoint, like
Hmm.
I just think I pretty much always side with him,
Yeah.
and because of that, I think that he is the perfect character to kind of lead a a newly reformed Avengers team in this dystopian future
Yeah.
where like the twists and turns from this like actual fascist government,
Right.
which I think that term has been cheapened.
Yeah.
Like it's like
Sure.
you can't just say that word all the time because
Yeah. It.
now it doesn't mean anything. So
Right.
like I'm not someone that overuses that word. If it was a tyrannical fascist government in Avengers Twilight, and like
Yeah.
Captain America, and he was a little, reluctant in the beginning. Like
Hmm.
he was like, and it almost reminded me of like Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino. Have you seen that
Yeah.
movie?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, in the
Yeah. I
beginning,
can
he's
see
like,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and you obviously see him become more, he comes back to his ideals, and he's like, you know
Yeah.
what, like he, uh, with his wife, and he's kind of like, listen, I have to do this, and like,
Hmm.
I know you're not going to be happy about it, but like, this has to be done, and it was interesting, and then there were some more disappointing situation. Not disappointing in like someone did something that I didn't agree with,
Hmm.
but like it was disappointing to see what happened to Iron Man in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah.
And um, I think Luke Cage is an interesting choice. Like
For
it
sure.
feels
Yeah.
like there are so many iconic comics that they end up choosing him, and I
Hmm.
still feel like I don't really know who Luke Cage is, even though he's in so many comics that they never give him a moment to like define himself and his values and who he is. Maybe
Hmm.
if I read an actual Luke Cage comic run or remembered the Netflix series, I would know. But like he's a
Yeah.
character I feel like I see him all the time and I have no idea who he is.
That's fair. Yeah. I feel like, I mean, he's shown up so many times in comics. I don't think I've ever sat down and read like an actual Power Man or Luke Cage comic, if I'm being honest.
Right.
But like I've read enough. But I mean, I feel like he probably isn't as fleshed out as some other characters, I guess. But then again, I haven't really read his stuff.
Right.
But he's definitely a character that I know like about, but I probably don't. I'm not as like I don't know as much about them as like a character as a lot of other
Yeah.
Marvel characters. But yeah, before we get any deeper in this show,
Yeah.
in this comic series, let's get into the summary. So, Avengers Twilight was written by Chip Zdarsky, with art, inks, and colors by Daniel Acuna, and letters by VC's Joe Carmena. And this was released between January and May of this year. The story is set in an alternate future where decades in the past, Ultron had launched a deadly attack against America, dubbed H-Day, that killed many innocents as well as most of the world's heroes. After the devastating attack, all the surviving heroes went into retirement, and the general public turned its back on their saviors, blaming them for the death toll. Steve Rogers, now without his super soldier serum, lives a quiet life with his wife Rosa, turning a blind eye to the many injustices of the regime that took over America after H-Day. This regime is led by Edwin Jarvis's brother, Kyle, along with James Stark, the son of Tony Stark and Janet Van Dyne. The true extent of the regime's atrocities are revealed to Steve after being saved by a group of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents by Luke Cage. Luke Cage leads an underground resistance called the Defenders, and Steve agrees to once again be transformed into Captain America by a reproduction of the super soldier serum. Shortly after, Steve begins helping those oppressed by Jarvis's and James' regime, and he has his wife brought to the Defenders base in order to protect her. She is not very happy about being brought into this new war, but she still agrees to stay there and help out where she can. Realizing that they will need more help to stop James and Jarvis, Cap tries to recruit Ms. Marvel, now a mother of two, but she refuses to be a part of it. The Defenders then hatch a plan to reveal all the evidence they've collected against the regime to the public on New Year's Eve, but they are stopped by the newly formed Thunderbolts team. Their plan mostly foiled, Captain America is forced to deliver a heartfelt speech to America in Times Square, but it doesn't seem to change the public's opinion of him or the regime. It is then revealed that Kyle Jarvis has actually been Red Skull in disguise this whole time, and he has been using Ultron to fool the American people with a steady stream of lies and propaganda. A few days later, after the Defenders learn that Tony Stark's brain is being kept alive in the raft, Captain America goes to free him. But just as Steve is about to complete his mission, he is confronted by James Stark. But he's then saved by one of the Thunderbolts who was moved by Steve's Times Square speech. On the way out of the raft, the Thunderbolt agent, dubbed the new Hawkeye by Steve, leads Cap to his old shield. As Captain America and the new Hawkeye are escaping with Tony's head, they are stopped by James once again, but this time he's in his own Iron Man armor. A battle ensues that destroys the raft, but Ms. Marvel and Thor arrive at the last second, forcing James to retreat. The heroes save the guards and scientists who are posted on the now destroyed raft, while the disembodied head of Tony Stark explains to the heroes Red Skull's plan to take over the US Army and then the country. Meanwhile, Red Skull reveals himself to James, who is still on board with the Skull's mission. At the Defenders' hideout, Steve and Tony, with a new robotic body, talk about what has happened since H-Day. Tony explains that he had a plan to save his wife before he was defeated, but his memories are fragmented and he doesn't remember what happened to Janet. Knowing that the only thing standing between them and Skull are the new Avengers, the original Avengers infiltrate Avengers Mansion to lay traps for the imposters. Instead, they find that the Avengers and every news broadcast about them has all been a holographic broadcast by Red Skull and Ultron. Red Skull blows up the mansion, but the heroes are able to escape. Before the explosion, Tony was able to discover the Red Skull has already launched an attack on the White House and the U.S. Capitol. Red Skull had fed propaganda to all the army and law enforcement, thinking that the president had started a coup. Red Skull, assuming assured victory, dons a suit of armor of his own, built by Ultron, who he promptly betrays. As the heroes head to Washington, D.C. to stop Red Skull, Skull arrives at the White House and kills the president. Too late to stop the president's death, Iron Man attacks Skull. Meanwhile, the rest of the Avengers and the Defenders fight Red Skull's forces in the capital. While the battle rages on, Red Skull launches several missiles on the US, which Tony flies off and tries to stop. Unfortunately, he is attacked by his son James and an army of drones, but Tony is able to hack the drones and use them to destroy the missiles. But with Tony distracted, James is able to overpower him, and Red Skull reveals one more card up his sleeve: a mind controlled Hulk. As Hulk begins his rampage on the Capitol, we see a brief flashback to Red Skull as Kyle Jarvis, taking a now orphaned young James Stark under his wing. James is left with his parents' last effects, including a ring that he puts on his finger. Back in the present, Thor confronts the brainwashed Hulk and attempts to subdue him. Meanwhile, James yells at a mostly incapacitated Tony, blaming him for his mother's death and spouting fascist ideologies spoon-fed to him over the years by Red Skull. During James' diatribe, Tony sees the ring on James's finger, which unlocks his memories. He activates the ring, revealing that his wife, Janet Van Dyne, has been hiding inside the ring in a shrunken down, hibernated state. Janet grows large and is able to catch one final missile launched by Red Skull. The Stark family is then reunited, and James realizes what he and Skull are doing is wrong. While fighting Captain America, Red Skull explains his tyrannical plot, not knowing he's being broadcast by the Defenders to the entire country. Having defeated his forces, the Avengers are able to quickly finish off Red Skull, but his suit was built with a self-destruct device. James tries to take the Skull's body out into the upper atmosphere, but Tony takes the suit from him and sacrifices himself, saving his son. The battle between Thor and Hulk still raging on, and Thor, being unable to subdue the Hulk, is forced to drown him, freeing Bruce Banner from being trapped in a body he can't control. 2 weeks after the climactic battle, a saved America is rebuilding, the people realizing who their true heroes are once again. Steve is reconciled with his wife and goes back into retirement. Thor returns to Asgard, and we see that Bruce Banner and Tony Stark get to live out their afterlife in Valhalla. As the story comes to a close, James Stark rebuilds Avengers Mansion with help from the new Hawkeye and Ms. Marvel, seemingly paving the way for a new generation of Avengers to form. All right, so Avengers Twilight. I mean, I think we talked about it a little bit, and I'm pretty sure I know your answer. But what are your thoughts like overall about this mini series?
I loved it, and I hope that they number one. I hope that they like do. I don't think I don't think there's a sequel to be told with this story. Like I don't think you could follow it up with a sequel because
Yeah,
the the shock factor of bringing the team back from retirement you can't do again, and how do you follow that up? So I think the only real follow up here are in sequels, and I hope we see spin-offs,
right.
and
Yeah.
I hope we see the spin-off with James Stark, like I had mentioned to you on the DM, and but it was incredible, and I wasn't expecting a lot. I was like, and then I
No.
realized it was Chip Zdarsky that wrote it, so I
Yeah.
was like, okay, Avengers Chip, I'm
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that comic came out, and it was incredible, and the art like is awesome. It looks like it was
Very cool.
inspired from the Spider Verse,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
I can see that. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, but I love it. I think that they need more like story. It's comics have the luxury of telling these types of stories that don't have to be canon. They get to
Yeah.
be one off, and they
Yeah.
get to kind of like run these experiments where you can't do that when it's a $200 million investment,
Right.
you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so I love that they did it, and I hope they do more stuff like it.
Me too. Yeah, I feel like DC does a lot of that kind of stuff with like Elseworlds,
Yeah,
but I feel like Marvel could do a little more because they do something like this every like, 10, 15 years. So it would be nice. But at the same time, I don't want it to become like oversaturated.
100%.
But yeah, this series was a surprise for me. I remember seeing the advertisement like for the first book, I think in another comic, and I was like,
Uh-huh.
huh. Actually, no, I saw an article talking about like Alex Ross's new cover for Avengers Twilight that gives like a new suit to Captain America. I was like, oh, okay. I figured it was gonna be like some like contained like Avengers, like maybe like a Secret Avengers type story or something, because his
Right.
suit looked kind of like tactical, you know.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I expected it to be like in the main continuity, so I went in completely blind. I didn't read anything about it. So when I picked up the first issue and read it, I'm like, oh, so this is like a futuristic thing. And like as I'm reading it, I'm like, I'm getting like kind of like the Dark Knight Returns vibes, you know, just kind of like an older grizzled version of Captain America, that kind of thing. And it was very just really cool world they made. I do think it reminded me a bit of this podcast series that Marvel came out with a couple years ago. It's called Marvel Wastelanders, and it was kind of a similar idea. And they had a bunch of different ones. I think they had like a Star Lord one, they had a Wolverine one, a Black Widow one,
Oh, that
um,
sounds sick.
a Doctor Doom one. Yeah, it was pretty cool, and they were all like their own contained audio dramas, but they were part of a bigger world. And then they had like a finale one just called Wastelanders. Oh, they had a Hawkeye one
Okay.
too, and it's basically a very similar premise where, except in this, instead of just being Ultron, like pretty much all the main villains got together and ended up like killing most of the Avengers, and
Yeah.
like the only ones left pretty much were the ones I already mentioned, like Wolverine, Black Widow, and Hawkeye. And then like the United States was split up between like Baron Zemo, Doctor Doom, and Red Skull. And
That sounds crazy.
yeah, it was a very interesting. So this reminded me a lot of that. I will say I think this is a little better because there's more characters left and there's more stuff to do. Like the thing with Wastelanders was it was mostly it was very like Mad Max esque. So
Hmm.
that was cool, but it was also just kind of like a bleak wasteland with not a whole lot happening. You know, I feel like
Yeah.
this being set in just like a future that was just kind of taken over by tyrannical forces, but didn't like
Right.
destroy everything. I feel like that lends to a more interesting plot. I feel like.
Yeah. It's interesting because, uh, like, the government forces that took over
Mm,
and the, corruption with organizations that are really supposed to be NGOs. And, I also liked in the beginning how there were so many parallels to what we're dealing with, right
yeah.
now in terms of like, uh, non-governmental organizations and citizens kind of like playing cover for a corrupt government. Like it was like there were a lot
Hmm.
of people that were like they made it their job to help the government strip away their freedoms, which is like
Yeah.
crazy. And
Yeah.
you know uh, I thought that was really cool. And I yeah I wasn't expecting the twist. Which are we gonna go full spoiler?
Oh, yeah. So yeah,
Okay,
everyone watching, if you haven't read this, I mean, I covered pretty much everything in this summary, but there are spoilers. So yeah, let's just dive into spoiler territory.
cool. Yeah, because we can't really fully talk about it without
No.
it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
but like I wasn't expecting that twist with Red Skull.
I wasn't
But
either.
like
Yeah.
in hindsight, if you think about like where the story was
Yeah.
going,
It makes
it
sense.
makes sense.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, going back and seeing, when they had that documentary series about like Red Skull, the misunderstood, whatever.
Yeah,
At
yeah.
first, it just seemed like it was kind of a ploy to be like, the old heroes were actually bad and, all that stuff. But, then it turned out it was just Red Skull being like, I'm awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was awesome. I think there were a couple characters that like didn't change at all. Like Red Skull was exactly the
Yeah.
same, which
True.
also makes sense for a story like this
Hmm.
because he has the same intentions and motives that he's always had,
Yeah.
and that kind of makes sense. Thor, I felt like it was kind of funny how he was the same
Yeah.
exact Thor. Like
Yeah.
there was nothing different about him.
Think it kind of makes sense though with him too, because he'd been around for like thousands of years
Right.
before he even
That's
joined
a
the
good point.
Avengers. So like
Yeah.
to him, like his time with the Avengers was like you know, like a long weekend or like
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. He's already like 3,000 years old or
yeah,
whatever. So, but I thought it was funny just because he's like such a brash bro
yeah,
that like,
yeah,
he would be the same. And, it was the female version of Hawkeye,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. That was interesting.
yeah,
Um, and listen, as much as, by the way, aside from the story, as much as I loved Alex Ross covers, like, I kind of think that they should save them for situations like this. It feels like there's
yeah,
so many like ugh, average mid comics out there that
yeah,
have an Alex Ross
yeah,
cover and they're not really good. Like this is a worthy story for an Alex Ross cover.
yeah, for sure, for sure. And
Yeah.
I found it interesting too. I think most of the new Fantastic Four run has an Alex Ross cover, even though he doesn't do the art for it. I found that
Yeah.
interesting.
And I love the new Fantastic Four run, but like I'm also, and this is one of the runs that I kind of shelved for a bit. Yeah, I think like Hawkeye, I think was a weak choice. Like they should have used Clint Barton. I don't know why they didn't
Hmm.
do that. Clint Barton is like not that popular of a character that's
Yeah,
in an MCU Avenger. Like he could use the spotlight. Why
sure.
that choice bothered me. What and you know, but the Iron Man that really like broke my heart. Like he really
Yeah,
had it bad. But in the
that was
end, he
rough.
had his redemption. Like, and it was similar to Avengers 1 where he
Yeah,
was
it
like,
was.
I'm gonna put it all on the line. You're my son, and big spoiler here, but James Stark, who's Tony's son, actually is Red Skull's right hand man, and Red
Right,
Skull manipulates James Stark that the Avengers were bad and his parents are evil, and it like took so much for Tony to convince James that like he's been played, and that
right.
I think was a it added a lot to the climax. I'll say.
Yeah, yeah, and like in the end, the only thing that really like convinced James was like his mom coming back, or
Yeah.
whatever. Which that is like one of my only critiques, and it's like extremely minor. The way like they kind of reveal that she was in that ring. I guess Tony put her in a ring. They never really explained. I guess they put her in like he put her in like cryostasis and shrunk her down or something. But I find it kind of interesting that like they didn't introduce the ring until the very beginning of that book, and I feel like I know they were setting that up. Like I'm sure they had that in their minds. I'm sure Zdarsky had that planned the whole time. So I'm kind of wondering why he didn't just like introduce it like a book or two back. It felt
Right.
a little bit like last minute, like, oh, by the way, there's a ring, and that's where Janet's been this whole time.
I agree. It made me think that he wanted it to be like a 8 or 9 issue thing, and Marvel was like, "No,
Mm,
we need it to be 6, something like
that's
that."
possible. Yeah,
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 because he is a talented writer, and
yeah, for
it's
sure.
it's rare you find a flaw in his stuff.
And he does a lot of like he does a lot of setup, and then like pays it off way down the line a lot too. So it's not really his mo to just introduce something at the last second.
Yeah, and it did feel like the payoff came pretty quickly. And
Hmm.
what's interesting about that? So Stevie, and for those of you who are watching and don't know, Stevie is my co-host, and Michael also knows we're all in a group chat we call the Nerd Council
Yeah,
with
yeah,
our boy Slav. But
yeah.
so Stevie had just read it like last week, and he
Oh,
he
nice.
read it from start to finish. He wasn't reading it month to month like we were, and
Right.
he said that he thought the pacing was a little weird.
Hmm.
Granted, I think he always complains about pacing,
Yeah.
but maybe it is a valid criticism, and it's hard to look at something like that, as a spectator when you're reading something month to
Right.
month versus, in a couple hours.
Yeah. I actually went back and reread it like from start to finish.
I think I need to do that too.
I don't feel like the pacing was off
Okay.
at all. I feel like too often they'll take forever. Like they'll spend like issues with just like they would have spent like 3 issues with Captain America like sitting at home being like,
Yeah.
man, the good old days were better, you know. And I feel like one issue was enough for him to just be like, okay, here we go, because especially when you bring on like when on the first issue you show him in his new suit, it would kind of like suck to have him not even like wear it or show it
Yeah.
until like 2 or 3 issues down the line. They kind of did that with Ultimate Spider-Man, which I don't care about too much, especially considering it's like gonna be a longer series, seems like.
Yeah.
But they did kind of take a long ass time for him to finally get like his suit and be like, you know, like actually doing Spider-Man stuff, you know.
Yeah, it definitely took a long time, which was kind of like, you know, I like that it's gonna be going on for a while, but I definitely want to see some Spider-Man action already.
And like, you know, this is different for different forms of media. I feel like with comics, I don't mind if things get rushed a little bit because I prefer that to just like pages and pages of exposition and people talking about stuff, you know. I feel like that works maybe in like a novel, and that would work in like a book or like a show depending on how like well you do it. But for me with comics, I feel like sometimes it can feel like a slog. And honestly, if there's too much text and too much stuff to read, it honestly detracts from the art for me, and I stop like looking so much at the actual art of the comic and just start like reading everything. And so I feel like pacing with, you know, comics, I don't mind if it's like a little more fast paced. You know, I feel like that still works for me, and I feel like this was there maybe like 1 or 2 times where it felt like they might have like glossed over some things or rushed a bit, but I never felt like it was slow. That's for sure. And I did really like that the last 3 issues were like the climactic battle. I thought that it was cool that he would just like, yeah, we're just gonna spend the last half of this on the big ass battle, you know?
Yeah, which was sick and like would make for a really cool animated movie, by the way. Which you know,
it would.
I think Marvel is. I know I mentioned this on our podcast. I don't know if I mentioned it here, but I think that they have something special going with their animated on Disney Plus, and you know Brad Winderbaum, who's their head of streaming. Like they, you know, basic Bob Iger, I think, put the halt on like he started capping the amount of MCU shows they could do. So I think that, you know, to provide new, fresh Marvel content, the animated is perfect for them because they obviously did a good job with X-Men. You know, they need to bring series to keep subscribers and gain subscribers, and animated is low budget. DC pretty much has a chokehold compared to them on animated.
They have for like 20-30 years at this point.
And like this would be, you know, like they did the Dark Knight Returns in 2 movies. Like they could do this and they can do it in 1 movie, but you know, I would love to sit down and watch an hour and 20-minute animated version of this. And I'll tell you what I would love to see now that I'm thinking about the beginning of the books again is D-Day. Like that would be a really cool. I could see a prequel to this be really cool. Like D-Day. You know, I kept reading about it. I was like looking. I was like, I tried looking. I looked it up once. I was like, is that a thing that's happened before that I don't know about? And there's been no Avengers D-Day, but it was such a significant event in this story. And you know, if you haven't read it yet, like the Avengers obviously lost in D-Day, and that's when the team kind of fell apart and went their own ways. And it was, you know, it was mentioned a ton in this series, and I wish, you know, I hope that we get a backstory on that at some point.
Was it D-Day or I thought it was H-Day.
Yeah, you're right.
Just so
I'm confusing it with World War II.
Right. I mean, they're probably. I think there is stuff in comics called D-Day, but I think it was H-Day. I think what really sets that apart is that not just that like a bunch of people died, but I think that like Ultron was able to like brainwash and gain control of Hulk. And
Right.
so like it ended up being like Hulk doing most of the destruction to everybody, and I thought that was pretty crazy and kind of messed up. Like honestly, everything with Hulk was depressing because
Yeah.
like he goes on a rampage and kills everybody, and that's like a big, like the inciting incident of everything, because Ultron was controlling him, and then Red Skull arranges for the U.S. government to like capture him and put him like under their control. So now he becomes like a mind controlled weapon of the U.S. government. So he's just living his whole life as like a puppet. And then
Yeah.
at the very end, the only way to stop him was for Thor to kill him. I was like, damn, this is kind of rough.
Yeah, that was bleak. And it
Yeah.
was also kind of sad seeing him with the, like electrical pods, like as if he was in
Yeah,
Iron
yeah,
Man suit, but it was in his skin.
yeah.
And, I feel like Hulk is a character that used to be so popular and now he's just
Yeah.
getting treated like crap in the MCU, in comics.
Yeah.
I kind of think he deserves it in the MCU because I think they really messed up with Mark Ruffalo. I think he's just an awful Hulk Bruce Banner, and it was hard seeing
Yeah.
that after Edward Norton because I liked Edward Norton as Hulk.
Yeah, so
Um,
did I.
yeah, and I don't know if Mark Ruffalo is a good or bad actor. Frankly, I haven't seen him in other stuff, and I don't really think it's
Yeah.
all his fault. I think that they don't really write him properly.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
yeah, it hasn't helped, and it feels like Hulk has just not been relevant in comics for a long time.
Yeah, not really. I mean, I can't even think of a recent Hulk series that anybody cared about,
Yeah,
really.
and
So, I mean, like, and his stuff used to be pretty sick. Like, that whole storyline with Red Hulk and Rick Jones becoming A-Bomb and all that stuff. Like, all
yeah,
that.
and World
Like,
War
that.
Hulk.
Yeah, that era of Hulk was really cool.
Uh-huh.
They haven't done anything close to that lately, which is a shame because he is actually a pretty like damn cool character, and I feel like the only movie that's
Yeah,
really shown that is the Incredible Hulk.
yeah,
There's kind of like the
and
Dr.
yeah.
Jekyll and Mr. Hyde aspect to it, and they really like played like the monster kind of aspect, and it's just they don't do that enough.
No, never. And by the way, they could have done something like really cool with Bruce Banner as like a scientist at,
Hmm.
he could have been working with Luke Cage and they could have played into that a little bit in the Bruce Banner and not so much the Hulk portion of it, so
Sure.
that was interesting, but he definitely, I think out of all of them, like he probably had it the worst. Other than
Yeah,
I
for
guess
sure.
Iron Man is like
Yeah,
right
well,
there.
I remember what a disembodied head, but he at least got to have like a little bit to do after Captain America freed him. Hulk was
Yeah,
just like he just got killed, which I do kind of appreciate that they killed off Hulk. Not because I wanted them to, but I feel like they easily
put him
could
out
have
of his
just
misery.
gone. Yeah, like they easily could have just gone with like Thor finding some way to be like, bring, like, come on, Bruce, I know you're in there somewhere. Like,
Yeah,
it would just kind of be a little bit of a trope to just be like, oh, well, they snapped him out of it. Uh,
yeah, which is a typical Hulk thing. But
yeah, right. Yeah, true. Yeah.
yeah, and I think Kamala Khan, like nothing really changed for her. I mean, she
Not
was a
really.
little bit
She was just a
older.
little older and was a mom. That's about it.
Yeah. But it was incredible. It was super creative,
Yeah.
and I just like, especially like I said before, the parallels between like what's going on in the real world. Like I
Hmm.
love when they do that. I think it's really
Yeah.
difficult to do that and like do it successfully, especially
Yeah, for
because
sure.
especially in today's day and age when everything is so
Yeah.
polarized, like they
Hmm.
did it in a way that like you know we're not talking about politics, we're just talking about a story and the
Yeah.
parallels. And I don't think that they would I don't think that this comic would turn off one political side or the other for that
No.
matter. I think anyone could enjoy it and anyone could see the parallels for what it is. And I think that's, really cool and really special because everyone has a
Yeah, for
different
sure.
perspective on everything. And you kind of have to, I think when creatives sit down and write something like, you know, I, I think a lot of times there are creators that want to take risks, and there are a lot of creators that want to agitate the other side. But I think that someone like Chip Zdarsky, to put out a series like this, get to make those parallels, but at the same time not turn anyone off. Like, I think that deserves recognition because it's really hard to do, and everyone always
Yeah.
says like, "Oh, you can't try to please everyone," and like in a lot of ways, yes, that's true, but we're
Yeah.
not talking about running for president. We're talking about writing a comic book, and
Yeah, right, right.
that's what he did, and I think it's incredible, and I think he deserves some praise for that.
Yeah, 100%. He did a really good job addressing some timely issues, kind of like he more worked them into the plot. I don't think he went in with the goal of being like, I'm gonna write something that's about, like
Yeah,
messed up stuff today, and he also never got like preachy with it. It was all very much like, this is part of the story, and this is like, the characters, what different characters believe, all that kind of stuff. It was very well done, and I
yeah,
think he did a really good job with James and Red Skull having a very like believable and well developed motive, especially Red Skull. Like it was kind of simple, but it was also very much
yeah,
like it took a lot of planning and like decades for him to like basically brainwash the population and control, the media and everything to basically shift the narrative away from like heroes and being like they were actually all awful, and you need somebody like me to be like a firm hand to like, the um unspoken part of it was like to control every aspect of your life, but he was pretending like, to protect you and keep you safe and everything. So that, I thought that was, it was very much things we've like seen before in stories and real life, but it was done in such a way that didn't feel contrived to me.
yeah,
And speaking of Red Skull, that freaking Red Skull armor, that was dope.
yeah.
That was cool.
He looked so cool in that. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they put out an action figure for it. And
Yeah.
like, obviously, I don't think we're gonna get Red Skull again in the MCU, but if
Yeah.
they ever do a reboot or something, like that is the look
Right.
they
That
should
would be
give him
sick. Yeah.
because it was cool. Granted, I did think they made him look really cool in the MCU with the trench coat and all that kind
Yeah,
of
for
stuff.
sure. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, uh, and for what it's worth, people always said like the World War II fashion from both sides, was like super innovative, and that was
Yeah.
a big part of uh, all sides like winning appeal in their own country, and
Yeah.
especially like the Nazis, like they were
Right.
very particular about that, and listen, I'm not co-signing Nazis or anything. I'm Jewish, but like,
Yeah.
it is true that that was a big part of it.
Yeah. No, for sure. They did look really slick.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's by the way, it's funny we're talking about H Day and we mentioned D Day because
Yeah.
today is like the anniversary of, or was it today or yesterday? I think it was today or yesterday that was like the
Mhm.
anniversary of storming Normandy, which is crazy.
Oh, no kidding. Wow. Well,
Yeah,
that's
talk about a coincidence.
another little layer of timeliness. So yeah.
Yeah, uh,
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, it was incredible. Like, I hope we get more dystopian stories. I feel like this is like one of those books that will inspire other creators, not just at Marvel. And yeah, DC has done stuff like this, but it's been a long time since they have done
Yeah.
any dystopian future types of stories. I think that was like a
Yeah.
late 80s, 90s thing with
Yeah.
Dark Knight Returns and Kingdom Come.
Right.
But they're
Right.
always doing Elseworld stuff, and which I know we're both reading Batman First Night, which is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of cool stuff going on.
Yeah. I feel like the cool thing with dystopian stuff too is you know, it's you can kind of explore the future while it's also kind of an alternate universe,
Mhm.
but it's not just like, you know, this is happening now, but it's just weird because it's different, you know. If you do a more dystopian thing, it's sort of like, you know, it is an alternate universe, but you're also getting to see, you know, like what would happen down the line when these characters are older, kind of thing, you know. So I do think those stories are really fun to explore. um Going back to the Red Skull armor real quick, I forgot. Like I was rereading it, you know, I was
Mhm.
kind of surprised because I'd forgotten that for some reason, like the suit like messed up his body, and like the mask went into his eyes and stuff. And I was like, did they ever give a reason for that? I forget. Like I
Yeah.
think he just wanted to like shed his body, but I'm like, it's not like he was sick or anything. It was kind of weird that he had to like destroy his body to become like just like made, you
Yeah.
know, like a suit, like a living suit, I guess.
Something must have happened. I'm gonna check. Hold on, because I
Yeah,
am gonna pull up Chat GPT real quick.
yeah, yeah. And I think I thought it was kind of a cool twist that Red Skull and Ultron were working together, but I don't feel like Ultron got enough to do. I felt like he was just kind of like Red Skull's like AI assistant or something for part
Yeah.
of it, you know, which I think was kind of the point. Like I feel like he did more than they talked about.
Oh, sorry.
Um,
Who are you talking about?
Ultron, because
Oh,
like
okay. Yeah.
Ultron was like teamed up with Red Skull technically, but they didn't give him much to do. I feel like all the stuff he did was like in the past, and they didn't really address it that much. So
Yeah.
it would have been nice to see like Ultron get to do more.
That was brushed over too. But I also think
Yeah,
that Red Skull probably had to. I kind of felt like he had to team up with Ultron because if he didn't, he would have had another opponent that, you know,
true.
Ultron would destroy Red Skull,
Yeah,
especially in this, like, you know, for those of you who are watching who haven't read it, you have to understand that this dystopian future where Red Skull is a fascist tyrant, like he uses technology to monitor everyone and for power.
hmm,
So, you know, if he were to go up against Red Ultron, Ultron would like, you know, Ultron's the perfect opponent in this
yeah.
situation. So I kind of think that it was a strategic alliance. Also, that's how I read into it.
Yeah, 100%. And he was planning to betray him the whole time, which he did. So that's, you know,
Yeah,
and he did need him for the more technological aspect of everything. Like I think he even used Ultron to build his armor and everything.
yeah,
So yeah, so like he did do stuff, but he was kind of Ultron was brushed over a bit. Something we haven't really talked about yet, but I did really like the way this story is formatted. Like it's not just a typical like, oh, all right, well the good guys have to rise up and you know like stop the bad guys. Like it is that, but there's a lot more complexity to it. Like, is at the beginning, at first Captain America is just off like, you know, saving people a little bit, but it takes him a while to actually start like reassembling the Avengers, you know. And then even when they do that, you know, they try to like change the minds of the people with that Times Square like speech at in New York, you know, on New
yeah,
Year's Day. And you know, nobody's really convinced by it, like nobody really cares. I thought that that was good because it wasn't just like a, oh well the heroes try one thing and it just changes everybody's minds, you know. I feel
right,
like the people were so ingrained, like it took them seeing Red Skull being like they don't need a president, they need a Fuhrer, you know, for them
yeah,
to be like, wait a minute, is our government actually Nazis, you know?
right.
Like it
That's
took,
a
you know,
great point. It's a great
yeah.
point. You know, and I completely forgot about that Times Square scene. But didn't he also
Mm.
like save someone who was like kind of told them to f off after? Or am I?
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah. Also,
Um.
I'm gonna take.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No problem. I'll just edit it out whenever you're ready. Come back.
Thanks, I completely forgot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No problem. Yeah. I don't. I'm trying to remember. I think he kind of did. Yeah. He saved an older guy as Captain America. and yeah, the guy wasn't too enthused. I don't think that he was there,
Yeah.
and like, yeah, I thought it was. Oh, I thought that was interesting too. Like, I was kind of expecting a big fight between the old reassembled Avengers and the new like fake Avengers, and then it ended up that it was all just like a hologram. Like all the news was just faked and like made in Avengers Mansion. That was quite a twist. I was
Right.
not expecting that, and that I was kind of
That
wild
was
that
brilliant.
the new Avengers never even existed. Like that was kind of crazy.
You
That was cool.
know, yeah, and it was cool to see like Captain America kind of have to like find himself and
Yeah.
remember his like ideals
Hmm.
and values and all of that, because it was quite obvious that he was old, living his life with his wife, and
Hmm.
he hasn't been a superhero in decades, and he even had to take
Yeah.
the serum again,
Yeah.
which I just thought like there were so many different brilliant layers to the story,
Yeah. Totally.
but the tyrannical government, and by the way, I was just looking it up. So Red Skull's body undergoes significant changes and enhancements. He fuses the body with an advanced suit of armor designed by
Hmm.
Ultron, and is particularly brutal as armor integrates directly into his body, including
Right.
cables.
Okay.
Yeah, but it wasn't.
So he just made himself a cyborg, basically. He was
Yeah,
like upgrades, yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
it wasn't
I
like
see.
something crazy happened to his body. He's just that
Yeah.
sick in the head,
Because when he showed up at the White House and showed the president, who he was, and like opened his mask, it was like there were like wires like going into his eyes and stuff. Yeah, it was pretty
Yeah,
messed up.
it
Yeah.
looked crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the James Stark, the Iron Man,
Yeah.
Kamala Khan. But like I said, I can't believe that they used the female Hawkeye. I don't even know her name.
I think her name was Ramona. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and listen, I know I'm pretty sure she's been in comics before. Like I've seen a female Hawkeye in. Is it?
That's different though, because I think the female Hawkeye is Kate Bishop. I think this is I believe this is a new character that they made for this.
Yeah, like
And
what
she
was
was
the point of
originally
that?
Bullseye. Like I liked her character. I didn't necessarily. I wasn't necessarily like, yay, a new Hawkeye, but I did like how she was part of the like. She was part of the new Thunderbolts and sent to assassinate Captain America. But then she was convinced,
Yeah,
that the government was messed up. I did like that aspect to it. I was kind of like lukewarm on like her being the new Hawkeye because they never really explained why she was so skilled. I guess she was just because she was in special forces, but they never. And I thought that was interesting too that the new Thunderbolts weren't superhumans. They were all just like normal like special forces
that's pretty
type
cool.
people. That was
Yeah,
interesting.
you
But
know. Sorry.
oh no, you're good. I was pretty much done.
So I was just thinking because when you say Bullseye, I was like, it would be cool to see Punisher, Daredevil, Spider Man. Like,
Yeah.
I would love to see this kind of story with
Mm-hmm.
those characters and
100%. Yeah.
Norman Osborn. Like, that would be
Yeah, that'd be
crazy.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
know?
and like most of them, like they never said anything about Punisher. Spider Man they showed die.
Uh-huh.
Daredevil died off screen, like off screen,
Yeah.
protecting other people, and that was one of the like catalysts that brought Steve out of it. Which was yeah, Steve himself was kind of a little bit susceptible to all the propaganda and stuff that was milked because like he was made to believe like everyone else that everything was relatively fine. The Avengers are painted in a bad light, but he didn't know about the Avengers, like attacking the other countries and stuff, which
No.
I'm not sure who that was then because the Avengers didn't exist. I guess it was just Red Skull's forces,
Right.
or maybe it was the Thunderbolts. I don't know, but
It
even
wasn't the
even
actual
he,
Avengers, and that was
right?
like the propaganda that made
Yeah,
it difficult for people to
yeah,
recognize Steve Rogers as a hero.
yeah,
And like,
yeah,
it was crazy to see the people reject Steve Rogers and reject the Avengers, and
yeah.
and it obviously, like, if you're just watching this and you haven't read the book, I hope you could understand how deep it went considering that Red Skull turned James Stark
Yeah.
against not only the Avengers but Iron Man. Like,
Yeah.
Iron Man couldn't. It took like it took like a real battle for Iron Man, and I don't think his wife was Pepper. I think it was Natasha.
It
right?
it was Janet. Wasp,
Janet Van Dyne. You're right.
which was kind of random because I don't think they've ever been together in the comics.
Yeah, I
like
don't think they've ever
an
been
extended
together.
period.
Yeah.
So that was interesting, I guess. I would have liked to see more of their story, like how the heck that happened. But
Yeah. Same. It like there were some things they did like that, which it was kind of like, why?
yeah.
Yeah. I feel like a story like that, people would want to see Pepper Potts. Like,
Yeah, well, I don't think Iron Man's really had he's kind of like Batman. He doesn't necessarily have like one specific main love interest. Like he doesn't necessarily have a Lois Lane, because in the comics, Pepper was with him, but she also eventually married Happy in the comics. So I don't think he's ever really had, but he's had like a bunch of girlfriends, over the years. So using one of them would have made more sense than Janet. I guess they wanted it to be another Avenger, but it could have been Black Widow, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny because I think it was, I forget which one, but the last Iron Man run that was just Iron Man as opposed to like Invincible Iron Man.
Invincible, right.
Yeah, he married. No, he didn't marry, but he was kind of hooking up with, not Kitty Pryde. Who's the other cat one?
Black Cat?
Not Black Cat. No,
Hellcat.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I think I remember seeing that, reading it somewhere.
Yeah, that was a great run. Not Iron Man, Hellcat, Iron Man, but he was with Hellcat, and now in Invincible Iron Man, he married Emma Frost, which
Okay.
I thought that was cool. I like
Lucky man, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, he always gets the girls. So,
Yeah,
I'm not surprised like that. I guess it's not so shocking that he had a random girl that we never had any history, because that's like his thing. But a story like that, you'd think they would use someone more familiar in that situation, at least.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it was like a big deal, but it was kind of one of the things I was kind of surprised by, and it didn't really feel like it was addressed that much.
It definitely wasn't a big deal, and it wasn't a big deal that it was the female Hawkeye. It wasn't a big deal with a lot of, but like I feel like if you changed a couple of those things, it would have added it up to make a significant difference. Like if they did use someone like Pepper Potts or Emma Frost, or and they did use Clint Barton, and they did have a Spider-Man, or but yeah, like it was really bleak, and it was bleak like starting it with Daredevil, learning that Daredevil was dead. That was pretty crazy too.
Yeah, that was. Yeah.
I think that significant character deaths ever since Endgame, and Infinity War, but really Endgame, I don't want to say a fan of significant character deaths, because
it's like yes, kill my heroes.
Right. Because it definitely could not land, and I'm going to give a good example where I don't think it was worthy, at least. But if you do have a great movie game, and you kill off Iron Man after he saves the day and dies while saving the day, like that's significant, and it has a lot of emotional, and people walk out, and I think that the effect of people walking out of the theater from something like that and telling their friends, like, oh my God, you have to go see it, I think that it has a lot of value. However, it could go the other way. And, I'm a huge Bond fan, and in No Time to Die, spoiler, but if you haven't seen it yet, you're obviously not a fan. Like,
right.
But, they kill James Bond, but the
Mhm.
villain who, you know, kills him is barely in the movie. He's not really a
Yeah.
worthy villain to be the. He's the only villain that's ever killed James Bond. James Bond has
Right.
never died in a movie. That's the only time he's died, and he died to Safin. And don't get me wrong, I like Rami Malek. I
Mhm.
think that they messed up and they didn't write him well and they didn't give him enough screen time. And like
He was kind of forgettable,
exactly,
honestly, which is
he
unfortunate.
yeah, and you know it should have been a big value add to that movie
Yeah.
to kill James Bond, and it wasn't.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, it would make sense to be like Blofeld or like a big, which I think he was in it, wasn't he? But then he got killed. I think
yeah,
he
he
was
was
in
in
it
it, but
briefly. Yeah.
he did get killed. I forget exactly how he died, but he was
Yeah.
in, he was in Spectre,
Yeah.
and Spectre's his terrorist organization,
Hmm.
and they were kind of like this Bond era, the Daniel Craig era, is like the first era where they've kind of had a continuous story
Yeah.
rather than one offs
Right.
with like subtle
Right.
references. And, so they kind of have been hinting at Blofeld the whole time, but not really
Hmm.
until Skyfall, which was the third one. But
Hmm.
in Skyfall, they connected everything that happened in the previous two movies to actually been done by Spectre, but like super behind the scenes. So they weren't really
Right.
leading up to it, but they ended up tying it together, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think character deaths could be a big value add, but like you better make it make sense and
Yeah,
be
for sure.
worth it. Yeah,
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think the deaths in this all like kind of had a purpose.
hundred
I
percent.
don't feel like, but I mean, even Spider-Man, like I don't like to see Spider-Man die. It would have been cool if he was around, but at the same time, I felt like that scene with his death and Captain America being there really just kind of put a finer point on how like tragic H Day was.
Yeah, yeah, and like they gotta make an H-Day comic like that. I don't
Something
see.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be so sick. And just imagine them putting out a comic and they say like your favorite hero is going to die and like marketing that would be crazy.
Yeah, that would be nuts, and like actually showing like, yeah, I mean, I don't see them doing it, but it would be cool. I would definitely, but I would definitely read it.
Me too.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it would be cool to see spin-offs of this, like with James Stark. I feel like we're just starting to see him because like obviously he was a villain the whole story, and now at the end he's become more of a hero and he has a lot to atone for. So I think it would be interesting seeing like his journey now and how he's going to carry on the Iron Man name, but also kind of showing different aspects of the world that we haven't seen yet, because in all ways, pretty much it is a very, for all intents and purposes, it is a completely different world to ours. So it would be cool to see other aspects of, explore more of this future.
It's interesting because so I kind of feel like they're obligated to tell James Stark's story because
Yeah.
this comic was so incredible, and like the one real like takeaway is James Stark, and
Mm-hmm.
he is Iron Man, who's like obviously everyone loves, son, and Iron Man died to save James. So
Yeah.
like you know, it seemed to me that they did that to kind of save James Stark, to be able to tell James Stark's story, and they could do it. And then if James Stark ends up becoming like, uh, popular, well-selling character, they always have the option to
Yeah.
do what they did with Miles Morales, because Miles Morales, they pulled in through a separate universe, and now he's in the main universe with his parents. I think that's what happened, something like that. But it was like through
Mm-hmm.
Secret Wars. That's how we got Miles Morales or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because like the Ultimate Universe kind of got folded into 616
Yeah, exactly,
as
exactly.
part of it. So yeah. But yeah, they definitely need to do more with James. It's like the first time we've actually seen that character, so they should definitely. And it's one of the first times, like canonically, that they've really done anything with Iron Man having a kid.
Yeah,
I think, like I think at some point he's had kids with Pepper, but it hasn't really gone anywhere. And then obviously he had Morgan in the MCU.
yeah,
But it would be cool to see to actually explore, a child of Iron Man.
right.
But
That
yeah,
was
this
super
is
smart.
right. This was Avengers Twilight was really really good. If you're watching and you have not checked it out, you definitely should. The trade paperback is not out yet, obviously, because like the books just came out. If you collect comics or just get the Marvel Unlimited app, I don't think all of them are on there yet, but you can definitely find ways to read it. I would definitely suggest you do because it is very good. Very much looking forward to hopefully seeing more from this, and hopefully Chip Zdarsky comes back to write it because he did a bang up job on this. Did you have any other thoughts about it before we wrap things up?
No, I think we covered everything, but I'll say
Yeah.
100%. Like, if you do read comics, or even if you don't and you're thinking about it, this is like it's probably in my top 5 comics, or maybe not top 5, but top 10. It's up there.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
you really don't need to know anything. You don't have to read. The only other thing that they even mentioned that was slightly relevant to the current comics was when Luke Cage said that he used to be mayor, and that's currently happening in the Marvel comics. Besides that, it's like as long as you even have a semblance of like who these characters are, if you've watched the movies or haven't, like you don't need to know anything
super
going into this.
accessible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to wrap up the episode, like usual, we're going to do our cultured picks, where we talk about just a few notable books that we have been reading recently, or that don't necessarily warrant a whole episode. So, yeah, what I had this week, I actually have a few issues. The first one is kind of a two for one. It's the most recent Amazing Spider-Man books, issues 50 and 51. And the big like recurring thing, or the big like event of these books is um Spider-Man becomes Green Goblin. Like this kind of happened a little bit earlier in this run, where Peter Parker got like injected like magically with Norman Osborn's sins. And when that happened, like the evil version of him went to like this brainwashing machine basically, and like kind of put like an aspect of himself into Peter's brain like permanently that could be activated, with code words. So then when Norman got the sins back, which we still don't 100% know how he got like the his sins back to bring back the Goblin, but now that's happened, he turned Peter into the Spider Goblin, which I think is like such a mix of like hilarious and kind of awesome. I really like the purple and black look with the Spider-Man suit, and just kind of like a goblin
Yeah,
version of Spider-Man's really really interesting. I honestly thought that whole thing in issue 50, where green like Norman's Green Goblin, and he's been Green Goblin for a while, and Norman, he's been pretending to be Norman, and Peter kind of accidentally finds out. I thought all that was like really intense, and just kind of the interactions with Green Goblin and Spider-Man were cool. And what I really liked too is the callbacks to the living brain. Like this happened in like issue 6 of this run, but the living brain kind of came back, but like in a different manifestation. Now, for me, the first Spider-Man comic I actually read was like issue, I don't remember what issue it was, but it was the issue where the living brain is first introduced, and he's basically just he's like the 1960s version of what a futuristic like computer would be
yeah,
basically. But then it goes haywire, and Peter has to like save his schoolmates from it basically. But it's been brought up a few times in Dan Slott's run, but to kind of bring this back in an updated way, and then even now it's the walking brain because it can walk,
yeah,
which is funny. But I like that it's like new, but it's also got like the throwback design to the original look and stuff. So that was very nostalgic for me, going back to like the living brain and doing more with it. So yeah, I look forward to the next issues of this run, and we've said before on here, but the Chip Zdarsky run gets way more hate than it deserves, and not enough love. There's a lot of
You mean
there's a lot of
Zeb
cool stuff in it.
Wells?
Yeah, Zeb
Yeah,
Wells is what I meant. Yeah,
I agree.
yeah,
I
yeah,
read both of these, and
hmm
I definitely thought 50 was better than 51. I think 51
yeah, for
was
sure.
a little
Oh,
wacky.
I forgot to mention at the end, Chasm shows up and he's gonna beat the shit out of
Oh
Spider Goblin.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, which
yeah,
I love.
that's awesome.
I
Yeah,
love. I want
yeah,
Chasm to have his day. I
me
want
too.
Chasm to get his own series. Like he is
Yeah, for
so
sure.
cool. And
He
if they
is.
ever put him in a movie, by the way,
Oh
like
my god.
he would win people over so
Yeah.
hard, especially that suit. Like there are a lot of fans that you
Oh
could
my
win
god.
over with just a cool suit.
It's
And
so cool. Yeah.
yeah, it's so
Yeah,
sick.
I showed my friend that like he's familiar with Ben Riley, but I just showed him that suit and he doesn't read comics at all, and he's like, damn, that's badass as hell. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's just so cool. Yeah.
and it's cool that they took that liberty because like Spider-Man suit, listen, it's fun, it's cool, but like it's definitely I wouldn't call Spider-Man suit badass,
Yeah, it's just kind of classic and like
100%.
done a certain way, it can look really cool.
Yeah.
But
And I'm not knocking it. I love the Spider-Man suit,
yeah,
but I
yeah, of
would
course.
badass.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that they are going back into like the sins. I'm trying to remember,
Yeah.
was that a Dan Slott thing or was that Nick Spencer when that happened? I think it was Dan
I
Slott.
think yeah, I don't remember honestly. I thought it
Yeah.
was Spencer, but it could have been Dan Slott. It's hard to tell.
Yeah. But it was a cool concept. And,
Hmm
I like that they're going back to it. I like I loved how Spider-Man accidentally finds out, that Norman was the Goblin again. And I would actually reference that if you ever come across fans that, knock Zeb Wells' writing abilities, like that was
hmm
brilliant. It was
Yeah,
also done
it was.
really well. And, you know, I don't knock him for 51 being a little wacky. I think that sometimes I think when you're like a creator and you're in this space, there's a story you're telling, and a certain part just has to be a certain part. And you're supposed to judge the arc and not really an issue by issue, but we're reading it issue by issue. So
Yeah.
like as much as like I thought 51 was a little wacky, I think that this arc is going well. um I love it. I love the Norman Osborn's back in it,
hmm
and that Chasm's in it. I like the Living Brain. I like that. I really liked the Craven in 51. I'll say,
Yeah,
like,
that was cool. Yeah.
yeah, I forget exactly what he said at the end, but there was something. I want to pull it up.
Yeah, because like he tried to like, it's funny because he's an enemy of Spider-Man, but he was like like I'm not okay with this Spider Goblin, like this isn't you, and he tried to
Yeah,
like cleanse him of he thought he had Norman's sins in him again, but it wasn't that. So but he tried to use the spear to cleanse him again.
yeah, he was like, "You're here because you're sick, sick once again with the sins of Osborn, and
Mm.
once again I will set you free.
Mm-hmm.
This madness is below you, Spider." Like
Yeah.
that's why I also love Craven. Like
Yeah, me
Craven is
too.
not. He's one of a kind. He's not a
Mm-hmm.
villain that like. He doesn't do this for power. He doesn't do this because he's malicious. He
Yeah.
does this because he's all about the hunt and honor and like,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
yeah, he's not a good guy and he's not like a good-hearted person,
No,
but
but
he's
yeah.
not and he is a villain, but he's not a villain because he has malicious intent. It's very
Mm-hmm.
different.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. He's a very interesting character.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. The
yeah.
other comic I wanted to bring up is Hellverine #1, which came out a couple
Oh,
weeks ago now. Yeah. Definitely some spoilers here. I don't know if you care, but it was a very cool issue. As I expected. It's mostly like the Hellverine comes back. But the spirit that possessed, I forget what it was called, like Baba Ghoul or something, that possessed Wolverine in the Ghost Rider Wolverine like Acts of Vengeance storyline. It basically learned like some of Wolverine kind of imprinted itself on it. So what was once like just kind of like an evil spirit became more of a more like the spirit of vengeance that possesses the Ghost Rider. So instead of just killing people indiscriminately, it's targeting like evil people. So like the Hellverine has basically become like a Wolverine Ghost Rider, which I find really badass.
Yeah,
Um,
that is sick.
and at the very end, they reveal that it's not Logan; it's actually his son Dakin.
Yeah,
That and they haven't really revealed yet, but somehow that spirit like revived him, and because he's supposed to be dead at this point, because Sabretooth killed him, I think, in like the Sabretooth War arc.
oh,
So
that
yeah,
would be
so
so
it's gonna
cool.
be interesting to see, how they brought him back. But I also feel like it's a really good thing to do with Dakin because I feel like they haven't done a whole lot with him lately. I mean, they've had him do stuff, and like I think his name has been Fang lately instead of Dakin, but making him Hellverine, I think, makes sense because it doesn't take Wolverine, it doesn't take Logan away from like the X-Men books and like his own series. It wouldn't really make sense to have an ongoing Hellverine series while you're also having a Wolverine series with totally different stories. So I think it
Right.
made sense to make him, and I'm glad it's him instead of just some random schmuck, who just like, some random guy like, oh well, he just happens to have Wolverine's powers because it used to be Wolverine's host. Like, no, it's like it's Wolverine's son. So I think that's
Yeah,
pretty sick.
that is cool. I didn't realize it was Wolverine's son. Now
Yeah.
I might have to check this out.
Yeah. I mean, it's only been one issue so far, but it was a very good balance of like story and action, which I feel like most first issues don't always have.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've been getting super into Wolverine comics just
Hmm.
because Stevie had like this MCU theory,
Oh, yeah.
and I was like, I should start reading like Wolverine and about Weapon X, which
Yeah, yeah.
we're about to talk about. But
Yeah, yeah.
you know, yeah, I didn't realize what Hellverine was. I didn't even like. I think I saw it in my weekly email I get from my local shop about the comics,
Yeah.
and then I saw you had mentioned some of that, and I was like, oh, that kind of sounds cool.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you chose to talk about it because now I know about it. I'm probably
Yeah.
gonna check it out.
Yeah, there was this 4 issue arc. I think it was called Ghost Rider Wolverine. I think it was Acts of Vengeance or no, Weapons of Vengeance. And there was like, like an alpha and a beta, like one shots, and then Ghost Rider like 16 and Wolverine like 25 or something or 26 were part of it too. And in the Wolverine one, Logan gets possessed by this demon and like becomes the Hellverine, and he and Ghost Rider fight, which is kind of sick. But and he
Yeah,
it obviously gets expelled from him and everything. But yeah, that was kind of a cool thing, a cool like 4 issue arc too to check out if you're interested in seeing like the first appearance of the Hellverine. But yeah, what issues did
yeah.
do you have this week?
So I have uh, the Ultimates one, which I love, and
Yeah.
it's funny because when we're talking about Avengers Twilight, and
Mm-hmm.
they're built like as much as I would love to see, and not as much, I would love to see them do more from the Avengers Twilight universe, but I don't see them going so hard on that right now when they're putting so much into this universe, and
Yeah.
so
Bro, I mean,
if
it's
you
better than the 616 universe. Like, it's so good.
yeah, it really is. And I think the 616 universe is pretty good right now,
Yeah.
but like this Ultimates universe is just something
Mm-hmm.
else. It
Yeah.
is
It's
insane.
so interesting.
It's so interesting. And, I have read pretty much everything Ultimate except for Ultimate X-Men, which I am going
Mm-hmm.
to read.
It's
But that's the only,
I kind of stopped reading it. I might get back into it, but it just isn't as
now I'm
connected.
not. Yeah,
It,
now
it,
I'm definitely not going to read
yeah,
it.
it's not as connected. Like, it's well done, I guess, but it was kind of taking forever to do anything. So
Mhm.
it's like, I found the story interesting, and like, it was, um, like the author and the artist are the same person. So it is like a very like cool, well done story, but it just like it doesn't feel like it connects very much to the rest.
See,
To
like
like
the,
if they do end up connecting it later on, I might get back into it.
uh,
But as of now, like it wasn't really worth my money, if I'm being honest.
yeah. it's special with all the comics coming out every week. It's expensive, and you know it seems like they also like didn't they pick some like random weird obscure
They picked Armor.
Yeah,
She just kind of like barely shows up in X-Men. Yeah, it would have made way more sense to pick somebody who like a major X-Men character. Yeah. I don't know why. I think they did that because she's a Japanese character and the author is Japanese, an artist, and you know, so that's probably why.
Yeah, you know, they could have included other popular characters along with Armor. That's
100%. And if it feels like it's just going to be very contained and stick with Armor this whole time, and I was like, I don't really feel that invested in this story when the only other Ultimate books are doing such a good job, like making this really cool and expansive universe. You know.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because it seems like they must have been so like they really had to put a lot of effort and care and responsibility into this new universe because other than obviously this one X-Men series, everything has been like creme de la creme quality. It is insane.
So
and
good.
you know, this Ultimates book that just came out, I just read it yesterday. You know, they're like, I forget, did you read it?
Yeah, I read it last night. Yeah.
Okay. So there's like some Immortus event coming. It is going to undo a lot of what the Maker did to, you know, so the Maker, for those of you that, you know, haven't read any of this Ultimate stuff yet, in Ultimate Invasion, another big spoiler, but in Ultimate Invasion, the Maker, who is an evil version of Reed Richards, basically has the power to change the world and hold back everyone's superpowers.
Right.
So the few in this book, which are Iron Lad, which is Tony Stark, Lady Sif, who is Lady Sif, Thor, who's Thor, and Doctor Doom, who's also Reed Richards, but from a different universe. Those are the Ultimates. Ultimates is really just another word for Avengers, but in this universe, they're called Ultimates, and they are trying to prepare for the Immortus event, which I think is like the undoing of what the Maker did. So they're trying to include superheroes and like help people who were supposed to become superheroes become superheroes. So for most of the book, they are kind of plotting because that's going to happen in 18 months. And then they step out into the real world.
I think the Immortus event is when the Maker's like city opens up again, and the Maker comes out.
I knew I was going to mess something up. Correct me if I'm wrong because I have such a terrible memory sometimes.
No, you're good. I mean, it's hard to remember all these freaking details. Believe me.
But yeah, so they end up finding Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne, or sorry, Janet Pym. They're married. Who, you know, they seem happily married, but like there's something missing, and you could tell they have like this void. And they talk to their like they are pest control, and they're like, there's got to be more to life than killing bugs and all this. And Iron Lad kind of goes to them and explains to them, similar to how it was explained to Peter Parker, that you were supposed to be a superhero. You could do this. I could tell you right now, you absolutely should. And this is what they say to Hank and Janet. You absolutely should, because, you know, this was taken from you and your life was taken from you. And Janet does it without a heartbeat. And Hank ends up, it takes a little more convincing, but he realizes that he's like, he needs to do this, and they do it, and they become, you know, I don't think he became Ant-Man or Giant Man, but you get the point. It's the same thing. And they become heroes, and then Captain Britain comes, and there's a fight, but you know, it's so good, man. And
it is.
This is one of those books that when you read, you're like, this is why comics in a lot of ways are better than the movies,
Hmm.
because they couldn't do something like this in the movies. They
Yeah.
couldn't do it. It costs too much money.
Yeah.
They would never make an alternate universe alongside the MCU.
Right.
And you get to tell these kinds of stories in comics,
Hmm.
and that's what makes it a different world, and that's what
Yeah.
makes them worth reading. And it's
Yeah, it's
really
great.
special that they're doing this. And like, you know,
100%.
and it's because of books like this that I will read absolutely everything from the Ultimates except for X-Men.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah.
No, yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's so good. And what really stood out to me, kind of a minor detail, but they just like have no qualms about killing people, because like when Captain Britain's like, I think they're called the Black Guard, start
Yeah.
attacking,
Yeah. Yeah.
like they show Captain America just like breaking somebody's skull open with his shield, and like the Wasp like zips through somebody's brain, and I was like, okay, so I feel like they're doing a good job distinguishing this from the 616 universe, because like they're like actually at war. They're just like, we're not gonna bother with like, oh, we can't kill people. They're just like, yeah, we're at war, we're gonna fight to the death with these people. And even at the end, Iron Lad Tony says like, because at first he just kind of wanted to remake their universe like the 616 universe, but
Uh-huh.
he specifically says like that didn't work. We need to do like this our own way, and in some ways like be better. And I feel like that's great, because I think a big thing with the original Ultimates is it was just kind of like another version of the Avengers that they called the Ultimates for some reason. The whole name, the Ultimates, kind of felt a little on the nose for me. Like, why
So
didn't they just call them like Ultimate Avengers? But with this, I feel like they really set the Ultimates apart as like they're not just a copy and paste Avengers. They're like their own thing with their own like agenda, their own stuff to do.
yeah. So I think that the reason they called it the Ultimates back in the day
Hmm.
was because they wanted to tell for two reasons. Number one, I don't know which is like the bigger reason,
Yeah.
but the reason I know this is because when I first started reading comics and wanted to read Avengers, my local shop was like, I was telling like super into the MCU. He was like, oh, you got to read the Ultimates.
Hmm.
So I read the Ultimates,
Yeah.
and I was like looking into it. Number one, they wanted to like tell modern, fresh
Yeah.
stories for the 2000s.
Right.
And they were calling it Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate
Yeah.
X-Men, and they call it the Ultimates. But the other reason is, and I can't stand Kurt Busiek as a writer. I don't know him as a person.
Hmm.
I just think he is one of the worst writers. His stuff is just like hard to enjoy because his dialogue and his
Oh,
writing is so. It
I don't.
just
I don't
drives me
think
nuts.
I don't think I've read any of his stuff, honestly.
Yeah, don't save yourself.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But he was writing the Avengers in the 90s, and
Oh,
I'm pretty
okay.
sure he actually had beef with Mark Miller over this, because Mark
Mm,
Miller, and the only reason I know this is because of that. Mark Miller was like, you know, uh, you know, basically he was like, there was an Avengers run going on when I wrote the Ultimates
hmm.
that was not selling well, and that's why they gave me the Ultimate. So I think they gave it the Ultimates to put a fresh title
I
on the
see.
shelf, differentiate, and that was why I think they called it the Ultimates.
And it was before the MCU, where the Avengers were such a huge thing, so I guess that makes
Yeah.
sense too.
Fun fact also, they actually, so that the Ultimates, when it came out, I don't know if it was an Ultimates 1 or Ultimates 2, but regardless, this was like early 2000s.
Yeah.
They made Nick Fury black,
Yeah.
which was the first time he was black.
Hmm.
And in it, they were talking about who would play each other in a movie. And let me tell you, this black Nick Fury looks exactly like Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah.
And he says, Samuel L. Jackson would
Yeah.
play me in a movie. Like, how awesome is that?
I think they even like specifically modeled him after Sam Jackson, which
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
which is, yeah, right, which is hilarious, because he
Yeah.
ends up playing him. I will say they are a little bit like, so I read one, because I got one of the issues for $1 on like free comic
Uh-huh.
book day of the Ultimates, and I was like, screw it, I'll just read it. And I kind of want to read more of it, because for one thing, Mark Miller, I like his other stuff. He's done Kick-Ass, Kingsman, Nemesis, like all this really cool stuff. So I like him as a writer, so I do kind of want to go back. And I read this one issue. I was like, this is actually pretty interesting. I don't think I ever really gave the
It's good.
Ultimates themselves like a chance when I was younger, so I might go back and read it. But I did think the Nick Fury dialogue was a little hammy. Like, it was trying a little too hard to be like, I'm a cool, like a little like
Yeah.
his. I kind of prefer the way Sam Jackson plays him most of the time. But like in this, I think just some of the things where it felt like they were trying to make him like a cool, chill Nick Fury kind of thing. I was like, all right, they're laying it on a little bit thick now.
It's tough for me to judge the Ultimates because I read it like first when I started reading
Yeah.
comics, and I don't really remember it too well.
Right.
But the last Ultimates I read, that not like the new Ultimate Universe, I remember feeling like it was just very surface level and it wasn't deep, and I was like, it was good, but it wasn't as enjoyable as other comics. It didn't have like these cool, interesting ideas going on, and
Sure.
So I think it's easy to enjoy like one or two runs of the Ultimates because they're like 10 or 12 books. It's nothing crazy, but like, I wouldn't go back and read all of them unless you really do enjoy them.
No,
But yeah, this new Ultimates universe is so cool. The Immortus engine is so cool. The one big question I have is, because we don't know, because it's this new universe where everything's different. So Tony Stark is Iron Lad. Does that mean he has or is going to get time traveling equipment or powers, or is that just related to this Immortus engine? Because it seems like it's tied to the Immortus engine, and it's not really a Tony Stark thing, and it's more like a Ultimates shared Immortus engine. But I hope that he gets some of like Kang's abilities as Iron Lad. Like that, I think would be awesome. So, time will tell.
Right. Yeah, that would be interesting. There are definitely a lot of things they set up that are hopefully going to have some good payoff down the line.
Yeah. And by the way, I think the suits are awesome.
Oh God, they're so cool.
The Doom mask is like the coolest
badass.
Doom mask ever.
Yeah.
It kind of has like those vents, it's like similar to the ears on Batman Forever's cowl.
Oh yeah.
This Ultimate Black Panther, Ultimate Spider-Man,
they're so good.
Yeah, I'm sure they're going to announce other characters.
I'm sure they will, especially how well these series are doing.
Exactly. It's how could they not?
Like the first few weeks of Ultimate Spider-Man and even a little bit Black Panther, like they were selling out. Like they've done 5 or 6 reprints of Ultimate Spider-Man #1. So
right, it's crazy. I saw that they just did another one. Like, it's so
nuts.
good. It's so good.
It is.
The art is incredible.
Oh
in all of them.
It's
like
good. Yeah.
That's what makes me think like when they were doing this, they really made sure that all of it was like super the top quality.
For sure.
They didn't let any BS go.
Yeah. So did you have one more to talk about?
Yeah.
Weapon X.
So I want Wolverine Weapon X. I'm not going to talk about one specific issue because I've kind of just been binging on the run, and I wasn't expecting much. I was like really just kind of reading about it to like try to learn more about Weapon X, and I was just blown away. So Wolverine is basically a target from a group of mercenaries, which is a Roxxon. It's actually, I think they're also called Blackguard, but which is interesting. But yeah, so Roxxon has a subsidiary called Blackguard, and the government is involved in like this special program where they're basically trying to create super soldiers and give them like super soldier abilities, and they have like a test group of mercenaries in Blackguard that have some of the abilities, and basically Wolverine is trying to uncover some of the stuff that's going on and while he's uncovering it, like there's a newspaper that's going after the information, and the newspaper that's going after the information, there's so they end up working with this guy who is, what's his name? Hold on. His name, he goes by Maverick, but
Agent Zero.
No, I don't think, maybe they call him that in something else, but his name
later on they go on what?
So they call him, his name's David North.
Yeah.
But he goes by Maverick.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, not David North, Christopher Nord.
Mm-hmm.
But he goes by Maverick, and he's super cool, and he is, like claiming to work for the girl who's the investigative reporter, but you find out later on he's actually working for Blackguard, and he's basically a double agent, but really prioritizes his loyalty. So yeah, it's super cool. It takes place through, I think there's in like South America or Panama or Mexico, something like that. One of those tropical locations, and I just love I love that there are forces that are trying to prevent it from being in the news, and there's the government and the media, and I just love stories like that. So it immediately pulled me in, and now I'm in a different part of the story where Wolverine ended up in some prison psych ward, and it's not as exciting as the first part of it. I'm like trying to get through that, because I've read online that people love this run, and then after this run it goes into like, I think there's like 40 something issues in Jason Aaron's next run, which is just called Wolverine, and then he has another sequel run to that run. And I think I'm going to get through at least this one and then the next one. And then I want to try to read some more modern Wolverine stuff, especially, with, I don't know what it's called, but there's a new Wolverine comic coming out from Jonathan Hickman and Greg Capullo. So I am super pumped for that. Yeah. Like,
that sounds cool.
Hickman's my favorite writer ever.
Yeah, he's super
I just think nobody writes comics like him. He's one of a kind. I think Chip Zdarsky is definitely like probably up there, and I would say him and like Jed McKay are up there, but I wouldn't. I wouldn't put anyone above Hickman. Just nobody writes like his sagas with all his guides and everything.
It is like there's so many details. It's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah. So but I'm loving the Wolverine run. I definitely recommend it, and
to check it out. Yeah,
it's super cool.
Yeah, about that Maverick character. I don't know if they address it in this, but he is one of the original people that was part of the Weapon X program, like with Wolverine and Sabretooth.
Okay.
And he actually is in, like, later on, like in the early 2000s, he changed his name at one point to Agent Zero. And he's actually...
I've heard of Agent Zero.
Yeah, like you've seen X-Men Origins Wolverine, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like that one guy with, like, the guns is that character, Agent Zero, Maverick, whatever. So... I guess they went with Agent Zero because that was more like closer to when they did the movies when he was going like that. But it kind of would have been cool to see like the Maverick version of him. I don't know, maybe someday.
Have you? Yeah, no. By the way, I that movie gets so much hate. I love X-Men Origins.
Yeah, the only like really bad thing about it is what they do to Deadpool, and that gets like redeemed by the Deadpool movies. So whatever,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Well, yeah, man, it's been great catching up with you and talking about Avengers Twilight. Great book. I'll have to have you on again when there's another great book to talk about.
Happy to come on, bro, and thanks for having me. Had a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone go follow ComicsCuts on Instagram and check out SuperheroCutz on YouTube, their podcast, and on Instagram as well. And you have an X account too, right?
Yep. all my accounts are ComicsCuts,
Mhm.
but the YouTube is SuperheroCutz.
Right. Cool.
And
Yeah,
you can find the link in my bio on Instagram or
I'll
X, Twitter.
I'll put a link in the description here as well. So
Thank you. I
there you covered,
appreciate
man.
that.
Yeah, of course. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to help support us, we can keep bringing you more great content. You can check us out on patreon.com/theculturednerd and look for the Cultured Pull List specific tier on that page. Thank you to all the current Patreon supporters of the Cultured Nerd: Wesley H, Mitch S, Connor Y, Anna M, Oscar B, Craig L, and Salib K. I've been your host, Michael Malillo, and my guest co-host this week has been Jerry from ComicsCuts. Our logo and visual assets were designed by Jose Navarro. Thanks, Jose. And once again, thank you for joining us. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share if you liked this, and check out our other episodes. We got plenty. Scan the QR code on the bottom left if you want to check out the Cultured Nerd on social media, as well as the Cultured Pull List Instagram. And if you want to check out Casual Experts, me and Luke's other brand, we got our own pop culture fandom type podcasts and Instagram, all that stuff. You can scan the QR code on the bottom right.